Okay. So my name is Jack Kaiser. I'm a cloud solution architect here at Microsoft, working primarily security, heavy focus MDI, Sentinel, Security Copilot, and the rest of the XDR stack. Um, for this deck, I'm just trying to get you guys just a better understanding of the use cases of when the standalone Security Copilot portal should be prioritized versus the embedded, and also how those kind of correlate and what that workflow looks like. So for this, if we're kind of breaking this down, we're first going to look at Security Copilot itself. We're going to look at the standalone experience a little bit further, and then kind of pivot more towards the individual embedded experiences, including those embedded experiences have various agents specifically for them. And then kind of look at what is the use cases of where the standalone may be a better option than the embedded and vice versa, as well as just some use cases and kind of how the licensing is working for that. Was there someone who had raised the hand on that?
Yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to be on camera. I would definitely welcome that here. So just
Sure,
wanted
I
to.
can go on camera. I'm just a little sick, so I'm not the best. Whatever.
Okay, so sorry, Jack. I thought
Give
I
me one
heard you
second.
coughing.
Yeah, give me 1 second.
Okay,
All
appreciate
right.
it, and thanks everyone.
Yep. Can you see me?
Yep, see you great.
Okay. All right. So for here, sorry. Oh, must be using my other camera. There we go. All right. Expand this back out. Okay. And then so first we're looking at Security Copilot in general. So with Security Copilot, Security Copilot uses the Microsoft orchestrator as well as using the Azure OpenAI to kind of work together versus there are some misconceptions. I apologize for how this one slide is kind of presenting. I tried to fix it, but it was having issues on there. As far as this, Security Copilot does add kind of the orchestrator is kind of what the secret sauce is outside of just OpenAI because it provides context. With Security Copilot as well, we do have the current ability to integrate with different third parties. They're available. Anybody who's used Sentinel, a lot of the connectors that are there, a lot of the prompt books and things we'll kind of discuss, those are built highly off of logic apps, which are used for a lot of the automation workflows in Sentinel. So if you already kind of have some experience there, that kind of will give you some insight into how that works on the back end. A lot of these are built off of ChatGPT-4 hosted instances in Azure with specific security and privacy controls for those instances as well. Kind of the way the Security Copilot process works with prompts, it usually starts with a particular user prompt. From there, it makes use of the orchestrator, which kind of helps ground the information from there. When you're using your user prompts, as in other Copilot products as well as security, you do have the ability to be vague if you want, not referencing what particular data sources you're using. And Security Copilot will make best judgment based on the connectors that are available there, which data sources are the ideal ones to use based on the requests you have. From the orchestrator, when it picks the different plugins or data sources you're going to be used, and then we'll also use Azure OpenAI to help provide a natural language response. So in a lot of instances, you could start where you want to be either as technical or specific as far as the data sources, or you can just use common questions you want to ask, and it will interpret for you based on the context of the question and available data sources, which are the appropriate data sources to use. And then it comes back full circle to provide the answer for those prompts in a natural language response. Things to note as well, all customer data is encrypted at rest for Security Copilot. It's never shared with the actual OpenAI project or used to train any of the models. There's also responsible AI checks within Security Copilot itself. There are two, the only data sharing we have are opt-in, where those are the first option being only available to the product team, just more kind of a workflow processes. And then that is normally only required for certain features that are in preview, such as we have like a playbook generator to help you collate playbooks for generating automation workflows. So in those instances, those are the only features that normally do require you to be opted in to use, and that's just for the preview feature, so we can collect the data needed. Also, something to understand as well is for Security Copilot, as far as the permissions are, they use on a behalf of authentication method. So that way, any user who is using Security Copilot, that usage doesn't grant a user access to data they don't already have explicitly given to them. So in that instance, all users have at least the access to use Copilot directly, as far as from a read access, assuming the plugins are enabled. But the underlying plugins or data sources have to be available to that user in order for them to pull back data from those plugins. So the two experiences for Security Copilot, we're going to have to go into the standalone versus the embedded experiences. So for the dedicated, that's going to be using the securitycopilot.microsoft.com URL. This is going to make use of the natural language prompts across all the various data sources that are available, and that can be connected within the Security Copilot platform. There's also pre-built and custom prompt book library that's available. With this, we don't just have Microsoft tools. We also have a lot of other third-party and custom prompts that you can create, as well as plugins. With that as well, we have things for such as session management, sharing, and export, as well as the ability to configure those roles and tenant settings. Just case in point, where I was mentioning about the on behalf of permissions, the only exception I kind of highlight for that is if you create a session, do certain things within that session that returns data. If you then share that with another user or group of users within your organization, they are able to see from that point moving back, as well as future session queries, as far as and also as well as the data that is reported back from that. So if there are instances where you're more mindful of data being available to other users, that is kind of the exception to the behalf of, because if they have access to the session, the underlying session may pull data that they don't have access to. So that is something to be mindful of when you are sharing sessions within Security Copilot. So for the prompts, there are various built-in prompts that are kind of available. A lot of them are kind of branched out to the different underlying data source, whether it's an Entra, Intune, incident analysis for XDR, Sentinel, etc. We also have a lot of different uses with making use of the Microsoft documentation learn that's out there to kind of augment that out with the prompts that you're doing as well. So first, the sessions, the way they work, the different sessions that you have within Security Copilot are all kind of provided all within the same session, have the same context. So as you ask future questions or prompts that are available in the specific session, it has the context of all the underlying questions and data that's been pulled in before. So all those sessions are have that context. You also have the ability to edit and rerun previous queries within those sessions. Also, you have the ability to use those pre-built prompt books. Also, any session you create, there's ability within Security Copilot to check specific prompts and responses that you have. If you want to create a particular workflow to reuse, that you can kind of create any custom prompt book you want based on the different steps you're doing within the Security Copilot portal on standalone. And then you have the ability to reuse those prompts. Also, like I mentioned before, you do have the ability to share sessions with any other Copilot user, so that they can kind of think of it like a read-only access, live access to that. So if as you're doing prompts, that data is live updated for them as well. They do not have the ability to edit it directly, but they can have read access to that, as well as visibility to generate summaries in either Word, emails, or so that you can copy those out to paste in other things such as OneNote or other solutions to kind of export the data that you have from those particular sessions. So from the plugins and extensibility side, for Microsoft, we have various ones. There's only a handful I'm listed here, but there are multiple more for all these columns. Some of the more notable ones are the XDR integration, Sentinel, Entra, Intune, Purview, Defender for Threat Intelligence, and Defender for Cloud. As well as some of the third party we have with Abuse, IPDB, URL, Netscape or Netscope, Titanium, etc. And then for custom, we have various KQL plugins. So if you want to query data to bring it in via Sentinel or via the XDR data that you have for the advanced hunting, you have the ability to generate KQL queries using natural language to KQL. So a lot of instances with Security Copilot, a lot of the benefits are more of instead of your end users being more a specialist in the particular product or kind of how to navigate the UI, the idea is uses of Security Copilot allows you to get certain tasks and present information where you can just ask it naturally versus maybe being the best person as far as being familiar with the particular UI or how to dig into those particular settings. You can just ask natural questions using natural language, and it will kind of generate that and pull that from the available sources that are there. And then here's just kind of a highlight of some of the third-party plugin partners and MSSP partners that we have. As far as the embedded experiences, the thing to understand with Security Copilot with the embedded experiences is unlike the standalone. In the standalone, you have access to all the different plugins and the data sources that are available that you enable for Security Copilot as a product itself. Normally, when you're shifting more towards the embedded experiences, you're usually limited to 1 or 2 or 3, depending on the embedded experience data source. So as we're going to show here, so for example, for XDR, you do have the ability to do incident summarizations. So in starting, normally, whenever you open an incident in the XDR portal, Security Copilot, it does tend to auto-generate the summary. We've since then modified the settings to, if you don't want to have that occur, there is the ability now to have it where you can manually choose to generate it. Some customers have provided feedback as far as SEUs, just so they don't want usage being used up by those auto submissions by their users going in the portal and those doing it. Some other use cases are script analysis, reverse engineering, obfuscating code. That's very important if you have technicians that maybe are not as well versed in reading codes or scripting, and you want the ability to analyze the script and get a better idea and explanation of what the underlying scripting is doing, whether it's like, for example, base64 encoded or not. It does have that ability, as well as when you're doing your investigations, you can provide other context and ask general information about the particular device or identities that are involved in there, as well as one other benefit of Security Copilot is as well, you get the integration with the threat intelligence, the Defender for Threat Intelligence product. Previously, or even currently, you can still get access to Defender for Threat Intelligence via a separate license. But if you are a user that is using the E5 entitlement with Security Copilot, one other benefit that I don't see is referenced as much is that also gives you entitlement to the Defender for Threat Intelligence along with that entitlement. And then here we show kind of the incident summary generation. This kind of before after. So when we're generating, we also, when you're working through the incidents itself, you get different guided responses of different tasks you can do based on what is in the actual incident itself. And you want to kind of get some like a task list of different things you want to do, maybe isolate it, disable a user, reach out to an individual, isolate a device. You can kind of get those tasks as suggestions as well as the summary. So in here we show the different incident summary that can be used to kind of look at the overarching incident itself and get the key points, kind of the breakdown of the movement within that incident, as well as you can see on this slide. Near the center, you have those analyze buttons. Those are for the PowerShell command lines. So in that instance, that will allow you, when you click on those, to where it will look at the different lines of the command line that's there, and then also give you description of what's happening and kind of give you information on what they feel is being done or what is the purpose of that particular script is trying to be ran. So for the key capabilities from a Defender side, a lot of it gives you the ability to look at AI-driven vulnerability assessments for the CVE data around those products. So for example, if you have incidents that are in reference to particular devices, user identities, things of that nature. You also, because you're using the other products in correlation with that, you get other information as far as like compliance statuses of those devices, if there's any known CVEs and other things that may have affected contributing to that device being more easily compromised, as well as ability to do on the fly threat intelligence enrichment of that to if there's different URLs, FQDNs, things of IP addresses that are associated with known threat actors, things like that. You kind of have the ability to pull that data back and get that context, where in the past you may have to individually do that or run like prompt books or something in, say, security in a Sentinel or an MD just to kind of get some of that context from there. But in this way, we've all integrated it with the Defender for Threat Intelligence, as well as when you're doing the investigations, like I mentioned with the tasks and everything there, you do have the option to generate a Teams chat or emails to affected users. So if there's instances, like for example, impossible travel, where you're kind of questioning where you feel like maybe this might be a false positive, but you kind of want to verify it with a particular user. If you chose to, you can have the option of prompting a user via Teams chat or email as one of the workflows you can do with directly within Copilot. One of the other advantages as well is the threat hunting aspect, is you get to use natural language to, again, big thing with Security Copilot, with XDR, Sentinel, a lot of our security stack, we heavily use KQL queries to manipulate the data and populate things that are being collected from our security toolset. So it allows you to use that natural language. And in this example, if you're working on an incident, you can say, show me like the last 10 logins. After recipient receives a malicious email, and it would generate what the KQL query you would need to do to generate that, as well as the response with that. And that's all within the embedded experience. So as far as the Sentinel aspect, kind of is this expansion of the XDR. The easiest way I look at it is Sentinel is usually where you would put your third-party data and data sources that are not natively ingested into your XDR portal. It's kind of the extension of the XDR portal to bring in the other data sources. So just like you have that natural language, the KQL query for advanced hunting for XDR, you also have that for the tables and information that you're bringing into Sentinel for those hunting queries. With that as well, you also get that same ability to do the incident investigation and correlate the data sources that are being brought in from Sentinel, as well as the data sources that are available through XDR. With that as well, again, the biggest thing I've seen for customers that are primarily using it is just that natural language, the KQL conversion. So in a lot of instances, there'll be customers that know what they're looking for, but maybe they don't know what table it's under, where it's structured. They're pretty sure they're collecting it, but they're not really sure how to query their data properly to surface information that's valuable for them in an incident. So as far as like the Copilot Entra standpoint, the things that can be investigated from an Entra Security Copilot standpoint for the embedded experience is it can assist with the risky user investigations, things such as the sign-in log analysis and anomaly detection. You can also look at context of user lookups as far as what groups they're available and kind of how their access is structured, as well as looking at information live as far as what's available through the direct Entra portal. Also, as with the other embedded experiences, we also have various agents that are available. So one agent that is made use of on the Entra is the conditional access optimization agent. With that particular agent, you do have the ability to evaluate the different policies that you have in place for your organization. From that, you may find gaps that you have where you may think all users may have certain applicable policies, but can also help identify where there's possible gaps in user application of those policies across your devices and users, as well as the ability to audit your current policies, as well as compare or also get suggestions on what other policies may have filled gaps that you have in your current configuration. From an Intune side, again, with the Security Copilot does allow you to provide more context when you're kind of navigating within the embedded experience itself. Again, just like the other Security Copilot components, a lot of them are helping you navigate, pull up the data that's more relevant to you within those embedded experiences versus maybe explicitly knowing where to pull within the interface the information you want. The important part is you need the information. In some instances, you don't want to have to be fighting to determine where those are within those interfaces, so you can just directly ask within Copilot to generate and populate the information that's available there. One other good thing too is that you can also do device comparisons. So if you're looking at different devices that are in Intune and you're having some misconfiguration issues or something where stuff is applying to one but not the other, there is some options to do side-by-side comparisons of those policies for those devices to kind of find out where those lapses are, as well as when you do run across error codes for your managed devices, you can actually get some more context on that to maybe outside of you directly having to go outside of us to look up those actual error codes. It can provide more context and suggested fixes for those directly within the embedded experience. And just like all the other solutions we're mentioning, the just using natural language, there's some things you can do in there as well. Like if you just, for example, want to get a list of all the unencrypted devices, all the TPM 2.0 devices, things of that nature. If there's just a certain thing you want to generally create some sort of filter or bring some sort of listing of, you have the ability to do that in natural language, and then it will do that for you within on the right side of the for that particular portal. Also, just like some of the other solutions, so for the Intune, there's some various agents that are available. One being the vulnerability remediation agent. This helps look at your different and assess the different risks that are being generated based on the vulnerability data that you're pulling in from Intune. Outside of assessing those risks and kind of populating those for you, it also provides remediation steps. So for example, if there's like a GPO that outside of a patch that needs to be applied, there's also a GPO that's in accordance with that, you'll have those contexts within there. So device driver and firmware data scope. You're talking about from the Intune standpoint, does it provide device driver and firmware? I believe that data does get surfaced within the Intune embedded experience. Basically, the data sources that are available through Intune directly through their APIs. Basically, anything that's available that you would normally even be able to access via the API should be available through those plugins, either via the standalone or the embedded experience. Also, one other thing that's also we do have the policy configuration agent as well. One advantage of that is if you've ever, I used to do a lot of engineering stuff myself where we had to do certain compliance hardening and things of that nature. If you're never really quite sure what Intune policy aligns to bringing your devices in standards for STIGs or CIS, the agent can help you define what particular policies are needed to bring those within compliance. And there's also the capability of kind of identifying some of those devices that kind of linger within your Intune deployments, and then provide steps and ways of properly offboarding them from there, so they're not kind of cluttering your environment, but they're kind of just sticking around, but not really anything happening with those, or they're kind of lingering within the Intune portal. So switching to the Purview, with Purview, it more focuses on the kind of helping you prioritize your DLP and IRM alerts. In a lot of instances, it gives you the ability, the way I kind of look at it is think of it more as a more fluid filter. In the next page, we'll kind of show that where instead of filter where you're very stringent and specifying very specific boundaries as far as what kind of policies and alerts and things you're getting, you can get a little bit more granular, again, using that natural language where when you are doing the policies and kind of bubbling up the ones that are more important to your environment, you can give that more context and feedback to the actual agents so that it kind of, like I said, creates more of a smart filter for that, as well as there's the ability, if anybody, I know myself, I haven't used eDiscovery as heavily in some years, but sometimes pulling data back from eDiscovery does take quite a bit of time and can be a little bit time consuming as well as a little frustrating. There's the ability as well with eDiscovery to use natural language to, like, if you know exactly what you're looking for within an eDiscovery, you don't have to fiddle through the actual configuration settings, knowing if you're doing it right. You can just ask within the context what exactly is you're trying to pull from there, and it can craft that and try and pull that data back for you as well. So where we kind of do the breakdowns for Purview, for the DSPM, that's more looking at your kind of the beginning prompts you would use that are available, as well as your postures availability. For DLP and IRM, that gives you the alert context and just more outside of just giving you the actual alert, it gives you the context of maybe how to resolve those, the gap analysis, the ability to also do prompts such as if you're investigating an alert for, say, an IRM alert, you can do a user investigation and maybe some advanced hunting directly on that particular user. As well as with DLP, you can do some gap analysis around those files or that information that is being flagged, as well as Activity Explorer on those files. Again, for eDiscovery, you do have the ability to get those evidence summary. And again, the natural language, the KQL, is also something that we use on the eDiscovery side as well. And here's kind of just looking at what the alert triage agent looks like. Again, the way it kind of works, on the top, you have your standard and then your alert triage agent. So in the context of that, you are usually, for example, for your DLP, you can specify within that which particular policies you kind of want to bubble up as far as from a prioritization standpoint, as well as provide some preferences. So for example, in this, you see the alert prioritization preferences. And this references, like, so for example, say there's a certain project that you are concerned with. In this instance, the same project, if there's any reference to any confidential project with this name, Project Obsidian, which is a new offering you have in there, you want to kind of basically highlight those as a high priority versus just the generic policies that we have available, and then also provide different contexts within those policies as far as, again, just creating that filter. As well, with any of the agents, when you enable them, we highlight the specific permissions that are needed for those to work properly, as well as the products or plugins that are needed for those, as well as kind of give an explanation when you're configuring those and setting those up of what the role access actually gives you available. Also, with all of these agents, we also have the configuration. Sorry. Yeah, so for Security Copilot, it is consumption based. I'll talk about that near the back end of this. So the way we kind of moves from Ignite is we now have the E5 entitlement that we do for customers that has a certain number of, we'll talk about SCUs, which is kind of like the tokens or that are used to, that are burned up when you're doing the different actions, whether it's a prompt or an agent. That's kind of that bucket that you're given for the E5 allotment. Outside of that, in our current model, I'll reference a little bit later how we have like a charge per SCU. And I'll get into that in a little bit on the back end of this. The thing I'll also mention is a little bit later too, we'll talk about where there's kind of better ways to prioritize or optimize your prompts and usage of Security Copilot to make sure you're not burning through those SCUs at a faster rate than you would like. Also, when you're talking about the embedded experience versus standalone, standalone is primarily where you would go for your more complex queries or investigations, especially if you're having to pull from multiple data sources that are maybe not isolated to just say Purview or Intune, or those standalone experiences if you need to correlate with other data sources that are not in that particular portal. That's normally where you'll go to the standalone. So normally in most instances, you're going to start off in the standalone, whether it's Purview, Defender, whatever your product is. And then from there, there's some quickly available options via the agents or just from the options that are available from that embedded experience. But if you ever need to expand beyond those capabilities, there's usually an option to then forward that session into a standalone session in the standalone portal. So from there, then you have the ability to access all the other data source and correlate all those other sources that are available that may not be directly available in those directly embedded experiences. So ideally, you're normally starting off in your embedded experience, and then from there, if you have to expand beyond that to other data sources that are not there, then you go to the actual standalone. So for more highlighting when you go from the standalone versus the embedded, so for example, with the embedded, that's available in the individual products. While the standalone is hosted at the Security Copilot at Microsoft. Again, one big differentiator is in the embedded experience. That's usually very product specific data only. So if you're trying to correlate data, say you're in Intune, you want to pull data that's in XDR or some other Sentinel data that you may have from a third party tool that's maybe pulling endpoint data or some other vulnerability data, things of that nature that you're not collecting, you would have to do that within the standalone. Because the standalone basically has access to all the available plugins that you can correlate all within one place versus embedded, which is very more limited scope. With that, with embedded, again, it's limited more to the scope of the particular product, while the standalone does have all the ability to use the custom plugins, third party, first party, etc. Prompt books are also not currently available in embedded. There's some suggested actions that you can do within some of the embedded experiences, but they're more just there's usually a handful of options you can do. And then for there, if you have to go a little bit further beyond that, that's where you make use of prompt books or kind of move that session from the embedded to the standalone. Also, again, with the session management, the full management is more available in the standalone versus the embedded. As far as plugins, you don't have the ability to do any custom plugins within the embedded experience. Those are more like your first party plugins that you have. All the custom ones are utilized within the standalone experience. That can be using KQL, different API access for different third parties. as well as a GPT plugin support. Again, standalone is more for your more complex investigations or multi-source hunting where you're trying to pull in from all the available data sources you're bringing, versus embedded's more the directly more fine-tuned for that particular product workflow. So again, standalone, when you're recording information from multiple security products, including like your third party, if you're pulling those in from Sentinel and whatnot, ideally you're going to be using the standalone for that, as well as if you're having use of any of those third party plugins, basically anything that's not a part of those first party embedded experiences, because those are again are limited by the data source of that embedded experience. So for embedded, again, that's good. For example, in XDR, that's good for your quick triage, summarization, script analysis, things directly that are related to the XDR stack, as well as things such as like device troubleshooting and Intune. If there's an error code, trying to differentiate that, look at policies, look at gaps, things as far as the things you're mentioning too, like applying different hardening policies and things on those as well. From a purview standpoint, that's normally, I kind of use it as like more of an advanced filter summarization part to kind of get to the heart of what the actual alerts contexts are for DLP and IRM. That's primarily the use case I see for most users that are using it in the purview side. Entra does have the ability to do those identity risk investigations where they have certain workflows where you can kind of dig deeper into a risky user and surface more information around the context for that user. With Defender, those are more guided response actions, usually from outside of the tasks that are provided or the summarizations and analysis there. A lot of that is more guided, more limited scope action you can do if you want that more freedom. There is an ability within the portal to click and say, oh, open this within the standalone, and then what it will do is it'll bring that session information over to standalone for you. So some of the use cases, so we're kind of looking at workflow. If you're looking from like an intention detection, looking for timelines, assets, IOCs, they're generated summaries of the overall. That's where guided or embedded for XDR comes into play. Guided response for triage containments. If you like, some of the workflows allow you to like things such as isolating device, disabling accounts, resetting passwords in those workflows. You can do that all within the embedded experience. As well as the thing I mentioned before with the script analysis on the suspicious files, you have that ability as well. For more, the standalone again is when you're more looking for a deep investigation where you want to query things across multiple sources. So say you want the context of anything you're pulling in via Sentinel, Entra sign-ins, purview risk, you want them all correlated, all in context. For that investigation, that's where you make use of the standalone. And then also in the standalone, that's where you do have the option in those to create those incident reports where you can export those as a Word or email or copy those over to paste within another, like say like OneNote or something like that, or even in an email if you want to generate that yourself. You have that ability within the standalone. So for the standalone, as far as the threat intelligence side, standalone does make use of the Defender for Threat Intelligence plugin. That was one of the things I mentioned earlier. Is with Defender for Threat Intelligence, that is something you get access to the premium version when you have Security Copilot enabled within that. There's also some various prompt books. So for example, if you want to get information if any of the like indicators, tactics, or things that we use are identified or can be attributed to any specific threat actor profiles, there's some prompt books to kind of enumerate that, as well as looking at any vulnerability impacted assets. Those are some different workflows you can do with that as well. You do also have the ability to do that that natural language to KQL if you want to interrogate any of the threat intelligence indicator. So if you're bringing in any like custom, so outside of Defender for Threat Intelligence, if you're ingesting any like third-party threat intelligence feeds with IOCs and ingesting those into Sentinel, you do have the ability to correlate those as well as making use of some of the third-party solutions, as well as the ability, if you wanted to create like a custom plugin, if you wanted to query ones that are not directly supported to roll in that context. As far as, and that's what's available as far as with the standalone. For the embedded, again, you're just looking at the threats related, particularly your organization. That's we have an agent in Defender for Threat Intelligence for the briefing, which will give you a context or say, give me 5, 10, 15 top things that are in the news as far as like vulnerabilities and exploits that are out there, where you can reference maybe referencing in the last came out 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and also provide the context of your particular industry and maybe your geographic region. Along with that as well is it will tie it to your vulnerability, assuming you're pulling in the vulnerability data versus your endpoints. It will give you the context too of where those exploitable vulnerabilities are in your actual infrastructure as what's being surfaced from the vulnerability data. And then on top of that, if you also make use of our internal attack surface management, EASM, it will also, you can tie that in as well, where you can get real highlight what assets are actually directly affected by those more recent threats that are out there in reference to your external facing through EASM or your internal facing with the vulnerability management. And again, just kind of looking at from a threat intelligence standpoint, or for example, say you're looking, this is in the standalone. So say you're looking at a particular one where you're expanding it, where you want to see is there any TI articles that reference the entities. So in entities, if you're familiar with Sentinel, entities could be anything from IP addresses, user accounts, FQDNs, different aspects you would use. You kind of use as pivot points to do your investigations. So in this instance, there's a particular script that's referencing maybe certain users or IP addresses, things of that nature, and you want to see is there anything from threat intelligence that provides any information where those are referenced or those misconfigurations are manipulated or used by certain threat actors, and just kind of highlights that for you within that. So looking at standalone investigations from a data security standpoint, so for preview embedded, it does allow, again, that ability to get that auto-generated summary, the ability to kind of audit and review your policies that you have enabled, as well as your risk insights, the ability to kind of bubble up the more relevant IRM alerts that are available there, as well as triage and find out where the more risky alerts that are available there. And it's kind of the same on the standalone as well, except you also get the ability to just generally reference particular alerts and kind of look at a various of my DLP alerts, which one should I just prioritize based on various factors that are being done behind the scene, as well as different things. You can ask status of individual users, where you have the context of not just the purview data, but also say the Entra and other ones that are available there, as well as the ability to look in correlation to other data sources that are available in the standalone. And then here we're looking at the Intune and embedded. Again, for Entra, we're looking at the investigating the users, looking at any sign anomaly, troubleshoot any conditional access policies that you may have. Again, finding gaps, finding out where the differences are in those different policies. Again, with Intune, the ability to summarize, analyze those codes, as well as use natural language. In this, for example, list the unencrypted devices. And then for the standalone, you can correlate those plus all the other available ones there. So for example, if you want to correlate an identity along with device risks, where devices that there's records of logins for a particular user and kind of want to get a sprawl of how the blast radius is for a particular user or an investigation, you can get that context there where it may not be directly available on just the Intune side or the Entra side, as well as you do get the ability to use that vulnerability remediation feature. As far as like the licensing, so the way it works is you have that E5 allotment based on you having those E5 security license. So as it currently stands in the portal, there is not a way to surface up the information as far as like determining you've used X number of SCUs versus what your allotment is for the month that resets. So currently we're not charging for overages. I believe in July is the tentative date where a lot of those feature sets and the ability to kind of manage that is going to be brought onto the platform. Once that's in there, then we will revisit some of that. But outside of the allotment that you have for the E5, you do have the ability to stand up actual infrastructure directly to handle. So the way it works is your standard SCUs are basically, so for example, say you have 3 SCUs that were every hour, 3 units of SCUs will be burned based on your workload in this example. The disadvantage to using standard versus overage is with standard, as long as you have that provision, you're paying that $4 per SCU regardless if you consume it or not. where the overage is more expensive, but gives you that flexibility to where if you have those bursts of usage that you need, you can set a certain number of overage SUs to make sure that you can still use the product and consume it. But you're also making sure that you're not overly paying for usage when there's not actually being prioritized or used. And then the thing we also mentioned with MDI, I mentioned that was a benefit of Security Copilot. Currently, it's $50,000 a seat for a user for MDI Premium. But by being a Security Copilot customer, you're not paying for that license. It's included within the Security for all Security Copilot customers. Also, another approach that customers do is they make use of logic apps to kind of automate the scaling. So, for example, I mentioned, say you're using 3, 4, 5, 8 different SCUs throughout the day, but then during certain hours, there's really no usage. Your office is closed. There's not really uses for that. There's way to provision down those SCUs so that on those off hours, you're not continuing to pay that $4 per SCU per hour. So there's different ways of automating that via logic apps. So for an optimization standpoint, normally if you're starting off, again, this is assuming you don't have the E5 allotment. That's kind of like the guidelines before we had those entitlements. Is normally the suggestion was at least 3 SCUs to kind of properly use the capabilities of it within an hour. From that, it's always suggested to kind of start with the embedded experiences first, as they tend to burn through SCUs at a much lower rate than the standalone, because again, the standalone, there's a couple things you have to realize. With the standalone, a lot of times if you're using that natural language interpretation, part of the SCU usage is it determining of all the skills and data sets that are available, is trying to determine what data sources to actually use, interpret that as a part of that particular function. As well as with the standalone, you're only limited to 1 or 2 different data connectors versus it evaluating it from possible multiple sources. So if you are correlating it from say 4 or 5 different data sources in a query or a session, that's going to use a lot more SCUs than just the 1 or 2 that's in an embedded experiences. Also, from an optimization standpoint, if you're trying to use less and consume less of those SCUs, it's better to use direct skills rather than natural language prompts. So for example, if you're saying, give me all the failed logins to the Office 365 portal, or through Entra that you have, specifying that you want to source it from the Entra logs versus just saying, give me all the failed logins, and then kind of having it determine it, that can cut down on that particular usage. Also, it's better to use some of the to customize specific built-in prompt books before building one from scratch. So if we have some built-in ones, you do have the ability to kind of create your own custom using the built-in ones as kind of a starting point to kind of modify those as needed and build those versus just trying to build one from scratch, because there are instances where certain actions within those may be more heavy on your SE usage. Also, think more about use cases versus like the users that are using it. So the idea is, because it's more of a consumption model, the idea is if there's certain workflows that don't require Security Copilot, so for example, if there's certain automations you're doing through the automation rules and say through XDR, they can do some of the same things that you're attempting to do within Security Copilot. In some instances, it would make more sense to do it from the automation workflow in Security Copilot. In the automation in XDR versus that, because on the XDR side, you wouldn't be burning through those SCUs. Also, with whatever actions you're doing, there is a monitor usage that is available, assuming you have the Security Copilot owner permissions. You can see the different actions, whether it's in the standalone, whether it's in the embedded, just kind of like what the burn rate is on certain actions and sessions you're doing. That's very important when you're first trying out the solution and trying to get an idea of the different workflows, use cases you want to use the product, and get an idea of what that looks like from a burn rate every time you're doing it. Another thing I usually suggest with customers as well is a lot of the agents and embedded experiences normally have scheduled times that they run. A lot of customers, I usually have them start on a manual configuration where they basically run those agent actions manually to kind of see if they're getting benefit out of those. And then kind of you start off manual so you're not automatically running in the background periodically and burning through those SCUs before you kind of determine if the outputs from those are useful to you. As far as the RBAC and data access, there's two main roles, the Copilot owner and the Security Copilot contributor. Outside of the naming convention, I usually think more of the contributor roles, more like a traditional reader role in Entra, and the owner more like the contributor role. The reason it's kind of more simplistic, where it's only like the two permissions that are there, is because all users by default have access to contributor role. The owner themselves, because we're not actually dictating your access to the underlying plugins, as far as now you can do things such as limiting someone's access to use a plugin through Security Copilot, but you can't directly, like, for example, if you don't have access to XDR data or Entra data or Intune data, implicitly using Security Copilot's not going to give you access, even if you try and query the data, because it's using on a behalf of authentication, it's not going to grant permissions to a user that aren't already there. It's just going to make use of that user's token to actually pull the data from those individual data sources. And then from a compliance standpoint, we have various certifications that we are in guidelines with. Also, for prompt evaluation, if there's concerns about the region that your data is being processed for, we do have the ability to set your evaluations to either be done in the US region, UK, Europe, or Australia. Also, whenever you provision any Security Copilot workload, if you do delete those particular workloads or workspaces within 180 days of you deprovisioning those, all that data is completely deleted from our end. Also, data, again, is currently encrypted at rest and is not used to train any of the AI models and is not shared with any of the open AI services. So again, just kind of like the best practices. Normally, again, this is assuming you don't have the E5 entitlement. You're just kind of like testing it out. It's recommended to do a minimum of 3 SCUs an hour while you're exploring the different skills that are available. Kind of look at what are the top use cases that your organization may have benefit from, whether it's things such as the guided responses, the script analysis, or incident summarizations. Those are some of the highlights that we have for, like I said, the XDR side. Also, make use of using custom prompt books for repeatable workflows. Also, make use of session sharing. So, for example, there are certain things you're investigating, instead of individuals doing multiple sessions for the same incident. Maybe if it's, for example, in XDR, if you have a session or incident that is assigned to somebody and they're working on it, it'd be more suggested to just share that incident with somebody else, so they're not redoing and pulling the same data and using more SCUs all around that same incident. One thing to note is the things such as the incident summarizations, those get cached as well. So, for example, if you summarize things like an incident summary and somebody else access that, it's not going to rerun that summary. It should use the cache of that if it was done by another user. As well as another benefit of the Security Copilot is making use of Defender for Threat Intelligence, which is included with that. And again, the idea is, as you use it, find those use cases, be mindful of the different SCU burn rate that you're doing, and kind of over time find out which ways you can manipulate those to be a little bit more lean and less on the consumption side for those SCUs. And then kind of closing key takeaways, standalone is for that more deep investigation where you have all the other various sources as well. While the embedded is more for speed and the ability to kind of more interrogate that specific product and navigate within that. Normally, in most instances, you would start an embedded experience and kind of pivot to standalone. There's not going to be a lot of instances where you're starting in standalone unless there's a specific use case or workflow you're doing. Again, within different embedded experiences, there's different strengths and weaknesses for those, kind of based on the portals themselves. With majority of those, there's usually most of the embedded experiences have one or multiple agents that are currently available, and with future agents coming for those. And then as far as the licensing, again, start small and kind of scale based on your use cases. And then with that, if you do start like using over your SMU usage, then I suggest where you use things such as like the logic apps to automate those overages there as well. And there's just some of the kind of resources we have. We have the portal, Security Copilot. We also have a customer connections program. If you want like weekly training, team community, kind of new things that are happening within Security Copilot, we have that aka.ms/join CCP. Currently, the models support up to 8 languages, as well as the UX design supports up to 25. And then if there are any compliance documentation requirements, we do have a link for that as well. And then just a look at the dark experience, the dark theme experience for the standalone portal. And just didn't know if there's any other questions or anything on Security Copilot.
All right, fantastic overview, Jack. I would love to see
right,
some of this in person, and I appreciate you joining us, knowing that you're not feeling the best. So thank you for such a thorough job in all the Copilot experiences.